So what was it like living through a 100-year flood?
It was a very intense experience. I live in Bibb County, and right um, in a town near us, a dam was breached, and so that spilled hundreds of tons of water into the most populated areas, creating a lot of damage. And then levees also broke, so it was and with the added heavy rains that we had been having, it was a lot of water damage done, and a lot of things were lost.
So what was it like living in your area after the flooding had stopped?
Well, the electricity was off for about a week, and all of our drinking water was off as well for a few days. So they had to ship in bottles of water. The interstates were closed, trapping a lot of people in the towns and on the highways, as well as all the exits were closed too.
Yikes.
So it was a scary experience.
How does this make you feel about living in this area?
It makes me really nervous about living in this area. I didn't know exactly the type of geography that we were living in and how a flood could affect us this greatly. So it really makes me want the government to inform the citizens of the area a lot more about the risks to living to this area and to create better plans of how to deal with floods like this.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we will have an interview with geologist Rebecca Crow.
Good evening, and welcome to this special NOVA broadcast. I'm geologist Rebecca Crow, and I'm here to discuss the geological aspects that helped contribute to both the Red River flood and the Southern Georgia flood of 1994. First, let's take a look at the Red River flood that devastated North Dakota in March of '09. This flood occurred during a natural geologic process known as spring thaw. It occurs every year when northern glacial lakes begin to melt and there is an increase in the amount of water that's in the river. This is a naturally meandering river, which means that it doesn't flow straight. It kind of curves in a bunch of different directions, as opposed to a very straight path. And this is crucial since meandering streams, they can flow out of the river basin very easily, and they can get out of their natural path and they can flood into the floodplain. This is especially true in this area of North Dakota since the land is very flat and there's really nowhere for the excess water to go. There is no marshland or wetlands surrounding this area, so it's extremely susceptible to flooding. During this flood, spring thaw combined with the rainwater caused major flooding. People living in this area need to be aware that the flat land and the natural process of spring thaw are two major risks. Next, we'll look at the flood that devastated southern Georgia and parts of central Georgia. This occurred in the summer of 1994. There were 33 recorded deaths as a direct result of this flood. An unusual amount of rain hit the area that summer and caused more damage than we ever thought possible. Hurricane Alberto swept through the area and dumped over 18 inches of water. The nearby Flint River climbed to 20 feet above the flood zone. 30 counties were affected by this, and due to their close proximity to the water. There was also an 80-foot tall levee in Macon that collapsed due to the water. This caused immense flooding and damage to the area, and much of the extra water drained into the city of Albany. Dams were also breached, causing the nearby Blackshear Lake to flood into Albany. That's all for tonight. Thank you.
Finally, we will interview a local environmentalist, Lindsay Jones.
While the members of the Fargo, Moorhead, and Central Georgia communities bonded together to attempt to save their cities from the effects of the floodwaters by using sandbags, and the fact that levees and dams had been constructed to prevent massive damage to homes, streets, and businesses, they were not able to prevent the flood from wreaking havoc in their societies. This is because working together at the last minute, or after a major disaster has already occurred, is not enough. In order to prevent floods and other natural disasters from increasing in frequency and intensity, all of humanity will have to work together to slow or stop the process of global warming. Global warming is defined as the steady rise in global average temperatures, which is caused almost exclusively by man-made greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions are caused by the burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. This burning of fossil fuels results in high atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, which trap the sun's heat and radiation near the Earth's surface and causes the Earth's temperatures and sea levels to rise. In the case of the Red River flood, an increase in the Earth's temperature definitely led to massive flooding. In the winter before the flood took place, an abnormally large amount of snow and ice blanketed much of the northern plains. This is due to the fact that global warming also causes gradual increase in precipitation, making it more likely that Fargo and Moorhead will continue to see even more snow and ice every year. The increased amount of precipitation and resulting abnormal amount of ice and snow was like a ticking time bomb in the Red River Valley, which used to be a glacial lake and is incredibly flat. The already dangerous situation turned out to be disastrous when an early thaw in March of 2009 caused an abnormally large amount of ice and snow to melt all at once, instead of gradually melting and refreezing, as it had done in winters like the 1994-1995 winter, which experienced far less flooding. Had it not been for a man-made climate change that increased both the amount of precipitation and the global temperature, this disaster may not have taken place, as the levees would probably have been able to control the amount of water produced by a slow, gradual thaw. The fact that global warming played such a large role in the flooding is ominous, as temperatures and precipitation only continue to increase every year. While levees and dams will eventually lead to even more flooding, they are the only available method of preventing flood unless or until the government is willing and able to build a diversion canal to prevent flooding in the Red River Valley. Unfortunately, the most the residents of the valley can do is to ensure their safety by moving out of the area. They can take advantage of the federal buyout plan and buy a home in a safer area. If they're unwilling to move, residents can only pray that the levees do their job and utilize a lot of sandbags in the meantime. In the case of the Central Georgia flood of 1994, global warming was a major contributor to the natural disaster. As I said before, global warming leads to an increase in global temperature, and this increase in temperature greatly increases the frequency and severity of tropical storms. In 1994, Tropical Storm Alberto stalled over central Georgia and added the final piece necessary to cause an incredible flood in an area that has already experienced a great amount of rainfall, also possibly caused by global warming. Unfortunately for Georgia, the government had built dams in the Flint River, which were meant to prevent flooding. However, the record amount of rainfall and increase in water level caused by the tropical storm caused the dams to break, which sent a rush of water into Albany and its surrounding areas. While this situation was literally the perfect storm and should not occur increasingly often at an increased intensity like the Red River flood, it is important to keep in mind the effect that global warming has on the safety of humanity. An increase in tropical storms and sea level means that more and more areas in the United States and across the world will be susceptible to flooding, including areas like central Georgia, which have historically experienced less flooding than the national average. As areas which have historically experienced little to no flooding begin to be affected by global warming, communities will be less and less prepared to deal with floods and their aftermaths. Caution must be taken to prevent the contamination of water that took place in Georgia, and every community should have a plan in case a sudden flood threatens their communities. Meanwhile, humanity needs to realize the negative impact we have on our environment and increase or eliminate the amount of fossil fuels we burn and the air pollution we generate.